Today's topic is the type of question that can quickly devolve into esoteric debates on the nature of aesthetics, culture, institutions, and definitions. The philosophical question of defining what art is has a controversial history and is well beyond the purview of a simple theme park channel on YouTube. The goal today is more to address the question of how we as a society view theme parks, assess their merits, and what lessons we take from them. This isn't to say that someone needs to appreciate theme parks as an artistic endeavor to enjoy them, only that such an appreciation makes it easier to compare and assess different examples of the medium. We've already done an episode about defining theme parks. For this episode, we're just presuming an understanding of what a theme park is. So, are theme parks art? As mentioned a second ago, the definition of art is a bit controversial, especially amongst philosophers. Dictionaries typically invoke human creativity, artifacts or something produced, and an emotional effect. We'll rely on a broad definition based on this one, from the Oxford English Dictionary, which includes all three of these things. We'll use these three checks for assessing whether theme parks are an art form. So, onto the checks. Are theme parks the result of human creativity? Well, obviously, that's a yes. Does this creative process result in some form of extant artifact? Again, that's an obvious yes. Easy so far. So, onto emotional effects. That's a pretty subjective qualifier, but it's also pretty easy. Have you ever cried at one of those nighttime displays at a theme park? I'm looking at you, Illuminations. How about laughed with friends at the corny jokes of the Dapper Dans of Main Street? Or, to go even easier, if you've screamed on a roller coaster, a theme park has had an emotional effect on you. In fact, I would argue that the emotional gamut theme parks are intended to create is broader than most other singular works of art. That's assuming we consider theme parks singular works of art, but we can get back to that issue. But yeah, checks 1, 2, and 3, all good. So okay, yeah, that was easy. Yes, theme parks are art. Question asked and answered. Boom, done. Good. Cut to the outro. What? Not long enough. But that's all I got. All right. No. It's all right. I got it. Okay, so, yes, if we're just looking to confirm that theme parks are a form of art, that seems pretty easy. But let's use some critical thinking skills and actually look for disconfirming evidence. Let's try to break down why someone might disagree with the assertion that theme parks are art. The way I see it, there are three primary lines of argument against theme parks being their own distinct art form. The first is probably the most common, and it's not even contained to theme parks. In an interview with Empire magazine back in October of 2019, Martin Scorsese said the Marvel Studios films were, quote, not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. Now, I love The Departed as much as the next millennial male film fan, but it was his defense of that quote in an op-ed for the New York Times that made me a little frustrated. See, if Scorsese wants to just hate on the nature of film franchises while those movies regularly make more money with larger audiences than anything he likes, I don't really care. That's just his taste. I'm sure he knows way more about the art of filmmaking than I ever will. What I take issue with is him using theme parks as a pejorative. Moreover, the way he described filmmaking in that op-ed in the New York Times, well, that could just as easily apply to his dismissive view of theme parks. Here's the quote. And that was the key for us. It was an art form. There was some debate about that at the time, so we stood up for cinema as an equal to literature, or music, or dance. and we came to understand that the art could be found in many different places and in just as many forms. And this brings us to the first critique of theme parks as art. To, apparently, someone like Martin Scorsese, their vapid corporate endeavors devoid of, and again quoting here, human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being. Now, I only know Imagineers and other theme park designers through their interviews, but I believe every single one of them thinks of themselves as human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to other human beings. Marty. And that's not to mention the singers, dancers, actors, and stunt people employed by these parks. I have known people that do that kind of work, and it probably won't surprise you to hear that they, in fact, think of themselves as human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to other human beings. Marty. Now, honestly, I don't want to pick on Martin Scorsese here too much. His quote was about movies, and he used theme parks as a shorthand for what he didn't like about the Marvel films. It does imply that he doesn't like theme parks and doesn't view them as art, but more than that, it's representative of a larger issue. This typifies what I would call the "they're just not for me" argument. Just because someone doesn't care for the aesthetics, values, and nature of theme parks, they would dismiss the industry's merits and the artistic achievement of what these parks are. The argument is inherently subjective in that any of the oppositions offered to theme parks is just like your opinion, man. Call them too saccharine, too safe, too sanitized, not challenging enough, only for kids, only meant to have broad appeal. I don't actually disagree with a lot of those. I think the same thing could be said of most music from major record labels, most films by major studios, most books published by the big publishing houses, most games from AAA developers. You get the idea. But none of that means music, film, literature, or video games aren't art. To me, the art of theme parks has largely been one of technological innovation and mostly avoided innovating on the themes the theme parks tackle. One needs only look at the rise and fall of extraterrestrial alien encounter at Disney World's Magic Kingdom to see how trying something new in the realm of story experiences can be punished in the industry. As long as parks fear offending anyone over anything, there isn't going to be the kind of innovation to theme park experiences this argument supposes is lacking. But that doesn't mean the themed experiences we do have aren't art. They may not be as good as they could be, and they may not be to your tastes, but those things don't change the fact that these parks still satisfy the definition of art. I don't care for landscape painting, unless it's of a fantastical setting. I prefer photographs. But I wouldn't say a Monet isn't art. It very clearly is. But back to the topic of story innovation. One of the worst hindrances is that the nature of the industry means it's too expensive for anyone to just make a theme park. Unlike music, which, I made whatever you're listening to right now in the background on my phone. It just took time and a little knowledge and not very much skill, to be honest. Unlike movies, where Scorsese and his cohort could create independent films away from the studio system and the restrictive Hays Code, the sheer cost of building a theme park requires investment. Sure, maybe a billionaire like Elon Musk could bulldoze half the Everglades and make Muskland, if he wanted, but most people or companies would require outside investment. And with that money comes restrictions. With investors come expectations. That means making something that people will enjoy, will come back for, and, more importantly, will continue to pay to support. Which brings us to the second objection of theme parks as art: accessibility. In addition to the cost of creation, the sheer cost of experiencing theme parks is prohibitive to most people in the world. Millions may visit theme parks around the world each year, but billions live in conditions that make those experiences unattainable. And the parent companies of these parks, like Disney, trying to play up that exclusivity by presenting themselves as lifestyle brands, doesn't help matters. Now, this isn't just an issue for theme parks. Even Scorsese's reviled Marvel movies, despite being seen by way more people than visit theme parks in a year, have similar issues. There are many in poverty around the world who will never see one of those films. But if accessibility is a determining factor in whether or not something's art, Scorsese's films would fall way short of the Marvel movies. The same can be said regarding the cost of creating a theme park. Most people can't afford to design and construct a building either, but architecture is largely held to be an artistic medium. And while just about anyone, or at least anyone with a smartphone, can make a video for YouTube, it's a bit hard to make something like The Irishman without millions of dollars for production costs. Accessibility doesn't determine whether something is an art or not, but it does seem easier to accept an art form when it's available for more people to consume, if not create. So, with those two objections considered, let's turn to the third, which we alluded to earlier. Are theme parks singular things? This may not seem like an important factor, but follow me here for a second. Maybe theme parks are just a collection of pieces of art. I call this the museum argument. Like a museum, maybe a theme park houses distinct works of art, but isn't one in and of itself. Where a painting, an etching, and a sculpture may all form part of a museum's collection, in a theme park, the collection may be a ride, a show, and a restaurant. Each on their own is a work of art, but we wouldn't necessarily consider the museum housing them as a work of art in its own right. Even if we consider a museum whose architecture is clearly artful, pick a Guggenheim, that architecture is standalone from the building's use as a museum. The building would be just as artful if the museum closed and a flea market took over the display spaces for its stalls. By the same token, if the museum's collection was relocated to a converted Walmart, it'd still be a museum, and the art it contained would remain relatively unchanged. But could we pull the same trick with a theme park? If we moved all the rides out of Disneyland to the parking lot, would they be the same? What if we replace the rides with chain stores like, Best Buy and Forever 21? In this latter case, Disney would be less of a theme park and more an overwrought outdoor mall. And while the experiences of the rides out in the parking lot, especially those with indoor queues, might not change too much, the experience of seeing them without the landscaping, path design, support buildings, and facades all around them would surely diminish their immersive effects. Theme parks aren't really singular. They definitely collect a variety of experiences, but they also aren't like museums. A curator might consider things like subject, artist, historical period, or style when swapping one painting on display for another, but largely, the works themselves are unchanged. Same thing with a lineup for a film festival. The context of how we experience a work of art does matter, but the work itself doesn't really change based on what's around it. Only our perception of it changes. Adding a new ride or attraction to a theme park, however, can change what surrounds it. If not an entire park, then definitely the themed land where it resides. Designers must consider what will be around new additions, not just the attraction's theming, but that of the other attractions nearby as well. Taking a ride out of its context in one park and putting it in another necessitates changes, even if those changes are subtle. And if it's done well, newer additions are indistinguishable from opening day attractions. Theme parks are often designed from scratch in a holistic manner, and as such, can be singular works of art, even if their nature isn't tied to being a singular thing. So yes, theme parks should be considered an art form, Their constituent parts can be assessed on their own merits, like the cinematography or musical score for a film, but it's their holistic experience that determines what we think of them. And while they are money-making ventures, reducing them down to pure business without consideration for the creativity necessary to make their product successful is myopic. Theme parks may not be the most prestigious form of art. They may appeal to a broad audience and may not have the pretentious air of the art house film, gallery showing, or experimental theater. For many people, that's exactly why they're appealing. From the creative side to the engineering, the technical craft on display in theme parks is at a level comparable to any other modern art form, and just as valid. So, are theme parks art? Should we talk about them the way we do a Rembrandt painting or a Mozart concerto? Let us know what you think down in the comments, and we'll see you next time. Hey friends, thanks for watching all the way to the end of this video. Here's a couple more you might like, and if you would, please hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up. It literally costs you nothing except a few seconds, and it truly helps us make more videos like this one. An extra special thanks go out to the people helping us over on Patreon. It's because of their support that you're seeing this video right now. If you want to help the channel out even more, head over to our Patreon and check it out. You can find it through a link in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we hope you have a great day.